It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. We're listening to some of our favorite interviews this week. This one's a doozy. From 2014, the great George Clinton. He says that funk is whatever it needs to be at the moment that it needs to be that. At the end of the 1960s, he took his doo-wop group, the Parliaments, added some LSD, some rock guitars, 10-ton bass lines, diapers, sometimes nudity, a spaceship, and he mixed them all up into the musical collective Parliament-Funkadelic. The music was funk, as nasty as B.O. and built around a rhythmic pulse called The One. Here they are live on stage in 1976.
I said, swing down, sweet chariot bound band. Oh, everybody raise your hand and move them back and forth across the room. Come on. Then move your body. Yeah. Everybody move your body.
Yo ho. Yo ho.
George Clinton.
Roof.
Welcome to Bullseye. It's great to have you on the show. I'm so happy.
It's good to hear that. I remember them days.
What was the first music that you played? Did you take piano lessons or
No,
sing with your family?
I didn't play nothing. Everybody wanted to be Frankie Lyman when I grew up. Everybody wanted to sing in a doo-wop group, and that's what I did.
Did you think of yourself as a good singer?
Hell no. You know, back in the doo-wop days, maybe one or two people in the whole group would know how to harmonize, and the rest of you sung in unison until you learn. Now, you learn after a while. By the time we got to the 1960, oh yeah, we was slick. I knew all about it then.
I want to take a listen to the first song that you ever cut on record, at least as far as I know. You can correct me if I'm wrong. This is the Parliaments, your original vocal group, with Poor Willie, and this is from 1958.
That's it. That's it.
What part were you singing on that record?
Baritone. By then we were just learning how to harmonize on the different four-part harmony.
How old were you then?
Poor Willie, about 17.
Were you still in school?
Just got out of school.
Did you think when you cut that record, oh great, this is going to be our ticket to stardom?
Oh yeah, you know, you were so close to it. Everybody around you was getting hit records. I mean, look, the group that recorded a half an hour prior to us, the Elgins, they did the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Sold millions. Monotones a couple of weeks before that, Pastels and the Heartbeats, everybody around there was selling. We were probably one of the few that she had that didn't get off the ground at that moment.
What was it like to be in that position?
No, but you know you were close to it. It was just a matter of time, even though it took another almost 10 years.
Let's take a listen to my guest, George Clinton, and his group, the Parliaments, his original group, with their one big hit from 1967, I Want to Testify.
Don't you know that I just want to testify what your love has done for me? Everybody sing, oh girl, want to testify what your love has done for me. Give me now, ooh, luscious.
Tell me a little bit about where that sound came from, because it's pretty different from that doo-wop sound of 10 years earlier.
That's my combination of Motown, which was happening at the moment, but at the same time, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones. It was my version of the funky Motown songs and the British rock and rolls that that they had just started invading the States with.
You were touring that record when the Parliaments started to change into Funkadelic. What were the first changes? Like, what was the first time you went on stage without matching suits or something like that.
When that song came out, we was playing with a lot of the 60 bands that was almost psychedelic, with the flower shirts and beads and things. So it didn't take us long to realize that the suits wasn't even necessary in the first place. Plus, we couldn't keep them clean. We wasn't making that much money. and the hip thing was to be funky anyway. Hippies was basically funky the way we were naturally because we didn't have no money. So it became hip to be funky bums.
I think there's a really interesting contrast between the song that I want to play, I'll Bet You, which is one of the first Funkadelic records, and I Want to Testify, the one big hit of the Parliaments, in that they have a lot in common. But I'll Bet You, which came out in 1970, just a couple years after I Want to Testify, is sort of on a whole other plane. Let's take a listen to it.
Johnny Man's very first words is hell, and I bet ya. If you bet on a horse and a horse go to win news, and I bet ya. If you try to sit on high, you gonna fall, I bet ya. If you want a winning hand, if you want a
That song has a weird story. Michael Jackson them did it later on. You know that, right?
Yeah, the Jackson 5 recorded that.
But it was also one of the songs that changed the Temptations into that style of singing.
What I think is interesting about the Funkadelic recording of it is that you have you still sound like a vocal group when you're singing, but the band is so much more band-oriented. It's not just backup for the vocals.
Well, that's what it was. It was Funkadelic. Funkadelic was the band. We were background singers.
I read that frequently in your shows, and at the very beginning of the 1970s, you would end up naked.
Yeah, that was a period. that was a period that, the trendy chemical substance was always around, and everybody was tripping. Yeah, I've streaked around a few times. And then the worst thing that could possibly happen is the music stop and the lights come on. Then you feel like an idiot. And that happened, I think, a couple of times.
I was reading some account of the band auditioning for Motown in Detroit, and somebody said, I can't remember who it was, but one of the members of Funkadelic said, "Oh, George went and stripped off all his clothes, went and told Berry Gordy off in the middle of the show because he had not signed the band, long before." And your defense was, maybe I took off my clothes and was running around on everyone's tables, and I was pouring wine on my head, so maybe it seemed like I was peeing in everyone's drink. But I didn't tell him off specifically.
But that part of it was true, but it wasn't about telling them off. It had nothing to do with our auditioning. He just happened to be at a show when we were running up and down the tables, and I used to pour wine over my head, and like I said, running down my body, it looked like it's dripping off my no, I wouldn't do that.
Let's take a listen to some Funkadelic extending fully into the world of psychedelic rock with probably one of the great guitar songs of all time, with Eddie Hazel on lead guitar, Maggot Brain.
We could only play a tiny snippet of that epic song because otherwise we wouldn't have any time left to talk. There were people in the band that were using all kinds of drugs. I mean, you mentioned that in the early days, basically everybody was dropping acid.
Yep.
How did you manage a big band like that? When you're dropping acid, how do you make sure everybody else shows up?
Oh, well, at that time, everybody had the same dream. I mean, everybody still was dreaming of being that rock star. You know, you see, we had dreams like the Beatles and Motown and all that was. So we never like missed gigs or nothing like that. The dream was bigger than any parties or anything else.
When Funkadelic became Parliament-Funkadelic for real in the mid-1970s, when you added the huge Parliament R&B hits to the big Funkadelic, rock jams, what was it like to have this enormous thing that wasn't like anything else in the musical landscape? There's nothing else going on in 1975 that's like, oh yeah, that's a lot like P-Funk.
Well, I mean, when you say it's Parliament-Funkadelic, but you also really have to say Bootsy too.
Sure.
Because it's still, all of that became one big circus there then, There's nothing like that because we had budgets and we had success. The only thing that scared all the record companies was that we were about to become what they thought another Motown.
When you say, George, that people were worried that you were going to become another Motown, you mean that you were going to become a rival who was an outside rival, a threat to them, and particularly maybe a potentially a black-owned threat.
Black-owned, because the black companies had proved that you couldn't rely on them to get off the dance floor. When Motown was hot, they were hot. Philadelphia was hot, they were hot. Stax was hot, they were hot. I mean, that's just the way it is when it comes to like shaking booty music.
Can you describe to me what it was like to put together the Live Earth tour in the mid-1970s?
Whoa, that was beautiful. I mean, we got the hit record first.
Which was the hit that set it off?
Tear the Roof Off, We Want the Funk. That record was a hit record. It became a big pop hit. I told Neil, get me a spaceship, and I would do what Pink Floyd was doing, or Who, or like a rock opera like the Beatles was doing with Sgt. Pepper, or even Hair. Describe
what the show looked like before we take a listen to it.
Well, you had a big 50-foot spaceship across the stage. You had a big 60-foot denim hat spaceship was up in, with eyeglasses from the car headlights on a big pair of sunglasses, big props on both sides of the stage, a massive stage. Then you had the Bootsies set up with all those big cabinets, and a limousine, silver platinum limousine going across the stage, and about 75 people on and off the stage, depending on which group it was.
Well, let's take a listen. My guest is George Clinton. This is Parliament-Funkadelic live in 1976.
You got a real type of thing going down, getting down. There's a whole lot of rhythm going round. You got a real type of thing going down, getting down. There's a whole lot of rhythm going round. Why the party people at y'all? We want the funk, come on. Give up some. You get up off your ass now. It's that time now. Gotta have some funk. We want the funk. Give up the funk. Are you ready? We need the funk.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. We're playing some of our favorite interviews from the Bullseye archive. This time around, it's George Clinton from 2014. He started out singing doo-wop, but he later found himself writing songs for Motown, and finally wound up creating a wholly unique sound and visual experience with Parliament and Funkadelic. Here's Funkadelic's classic, Cosmic Slop.
Sister and 3 young brothers. We seen it hard, we seen it kind of rough. But always with a smile, she was sure to try to hide the fact from us that life was really tough. I can hear my mother call.
Almost all of the Parliament and Funkadelic records after the first couple years were designed by a guy called Pedro Bell. And he has an incredibly distinctive style that anyone who's ever seen a Funkadelic record recognizes. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about how you met him and how he became like the house artist of the funk?
Pedro used to write me letters up in Toronto when I lived in Toronto. And the Postmaster General came and asked me, was I in some kind of organization? He wanted to know what kind of organization I was in, make sure it wasn't some subversive organization, because he used to draw on the letters the same way he do on the albums, same kind of little cartoons. You know, pimps from outer space and maggots and worms, and it was just like it was perfect for Funkadelic. I thought it was kind of cute, so I asked him to do the album, and he did Cosmic Slop. You know, and after that he did all the Funkadelic albums, and he's Legally Blind.
Why were you so committed to having this mythological world around Parliament and Funkadelic in the middle of the 70s?
Well, first of all, I feel like characters last longer than people do anyway. You know, like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, they never worry about getting old. So I think characters, you put the whole thing into a character perspective, it can go year in and year out. It's just getting new stories. So that's mainly where I was coming from, you know, like I grew up in New Jersey when West Side Story, Hair, all of those, you know, Broadway plays was jumping off. And rock started becoming, you know, being able to graduate into that. So I said R&B should be able to do it too.
When you got Bootsy and Catfish and so on to join your band, I imagine that a big part of what was so great about it was how brilliant they were as musicians and are as musicians. But was there also part of it that was cool that you were stealing James Brown's band?
Oh no, that never, you know.
Or I should say, given what I've heard about what it was like to be in James Brown band, maybe liberating James Brown's band?
No, but you know what? They all would talk like that, but they all have so much to pay, you know, to that experience that they end up saying how much they learned from being there. Do all the craziness they say James was about, they always tell you that if he said something about here's a beat, here's a groove, you had to pay attention to it.
It seems like at some point or other, almost everybody in the group quit over money.
Yeah, that's when you grow up and you get married and it's no longer just you and your group, that becomes a reality. So a lot of people have to quit over money, and if it's anything like the majority of the situation, managers, lawyers, accountants, record companies, publishers, they all have a very educated way of manipulating that.
Let me ask you this. When, in the mid-1970s, as funk became a sort of dominant sound with James Brown and the tail end of Sly Stone's career, What did you think of those guys whose success had predated yours? You even toured with Sly a little bit in the late 70s, and you've recorded recently with him.
He's still my favorite from all of that period. His chemistry has always been a thing with me. I like everybody that played with us. I try to stay close as much as I can to as many of them as I can. That's the one thing I think about Sly's group. That family was impeccable.
What's Sly's health like?
He's still being Sly, but he's not, he's not sick. I got sick and I had to straighten up, but I got sick and I don't get sick that often. He's another one that it'll hit him sooner or later, but he seemed to be all right now. He had more problems like I was having with the legal stuff and the wrestling with lawyers and managers. They got him in such a bind. He's just tied up in that, and he really needs some kind of intervention, in the whole legal concept. Both of us need that. I managed to get a team together and fight pretty hard at it, but he really needs that kind of help.
Did you have a hard time keeping your business affairs together in the last,
Yes, I've just actually gotten myself the last couple of years. I've been trying for the longest, but you can't do that and smoke crack at the same time. It don't work, and I was trying to do that, but you have to stop just because you can't take care of that business, and they know you can.
How did you do it?
Well, the head start, I just got run down and frustrated, tired, and got run down and got sick. Once I got sick, I know what I had to do. Once I got the rest, my whole thing was, okay, I got to make a production out of this. I got to find a way to not want to get high, and all I had to do was think about the music was being messed with. So right then, if I caught these people off guard by straightening up, I'll be able to go real fast before they realize that I'm not getting high no more. I'll be able to do a lot of stuff. And that was my only thing I had to do. I didn't have to go no rehab or no nothing. Dope ain't that good.
When you think back to your career, what period of time do you think the most of?
I'm down with all, I'm down with probably all of it. The fun was, running around with the mothership, of course, but also running around in Detroit doing, from Testify to I Bet You, doing the Psychedelic era. That was fun as hell. The doo-wop days back in Jersey and Plainfield was all different kinds of fun. The hip-hop days, of course, has been really fun because it always seemed like old school and we're supposed to be out of here, but we still have so much fun on the stage right now with the band that as long as it's still being fun to me, that's what I'll keep doing.
Well, George, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. It was really great to get to talk to you.
Okay, thanks, man. Take care.
George Clinton from 2014. If you haven't checked out a record of his, I don't know where, Maggot Brain by Funkadelic is one if you really like guitars. I'm a big fan of Mothership Connection by Parliament. My daughter's favorite song is on there. It's called Night of the Thumposaurus Peoples. She likes it because I told her that it is about dinosaurs learning to dance. The latest Parliament record is called Medicaid Fraud Dog. This song is called I'm Gonna Make You Sick of Me.